All right. Welcome back to another episode of Level Up Grappling Podcast. Coach Brian here, straight out of PCI Jiu Jitsu, Mission Viejo, California. We have an almost all Aussie episode today, outside of me, but I'm slowly but surely becoming an adopted member of the Australian community, or at least I would like to think so. Even though I do believe in saving the kangaroos, I don't want to eat them like Adam. So today, our special Scott's looking like, Our special guest is Scott Steer. Scott Steer is a multiple proficiency, I would like to say, grappler, and not only a judo black belt, but also a master of sport in Sambo. And I do want to get into that. So, Scott, number one, welcome to the show. And number two, why don't you walk us through your martial arts origin story? Tell us all about it. Walk us through what you've been up to, how you got started, and what brought you here.
Okay, well, got started when I was 6 years old. I had just watched the Karate Kid movie back in the mid-'80s, and I was being a bit rough and tough with my little sister. So I spent the time after watching that movie walking down the hallway of my parents' house, kicking the walls, and then trying my moves on my sister, I suppose, with the kicking and the punching. And I kind of pitched it to my parents that I want to do karate. And we lived in a small country town in Victoria, down the bottom of mainland Australia, and there wasn't really much in the local region. But I come home from primary school a few weeks later, and then my mum and dad said, "Oh, well, there's no karate in town, but we found a judo club. It's at the end of our street, so it's only sort of 600 meters down the road." So I went along there and was hooked pretty much straight away. Uh, My coach and long term mentor and friend has been with me pretty much through the whole ride. He's a Vietnam veteran from the Australian Army, and as my life's gone on, he's been a massive influence. So started very early, and I think my first competition, I was about 7 years old, and picked up a bronze medal there, and from there, that was it. Every comp I could go in, I was putting my hat in the ring and having a go. And nearly 40 years later, still battered and bruised and broken, and I'm still trying to get in there and play with the young guys.
Like a true psychopath, just like the rest of us. Yes, that's what we do. So how did you get into Sambo?
Yeah, Sambo, as the years went on and as I got older, I started to experiment in other grappling arts. As more sort of started coming through to Australia as well. Jiu-jitsu was starting to show its head around mid to late 90s. Sambo popped up here, there and everywhere. It's very sporadic here in Australia, even though we're a multicultural country. We're kind of spread out and, I had a crack at everything. Sumo wrestling, Mongolian style, the traditional forms of wrestling, bit of everything. And it wasn't until probably be about 5-6 years ago when used to be a few more Sambo practitioners sort of popping up with the success of UFC, obviously, that I got back into it. And once they've developed their grading syllabus, sort of started going through the training for that. And I did my Master of Sport for that about 4 years ago now, around Christmas time. It's gone pretty quick.
That's incredible. So how would you compare and contrast for yourself Sambo versus Judo? Like, what would you say would be the key similarities and differences?
Yeah, similarities. Judo is very similar to the sport Sambo. Obviously, you got the 3 different types of Sambo as well, which is a lot of people don't really realize. You've got sport Sambo, which, as I said, it's more like Judo. Combat Sambo is more like MMA because everything goes. And then beach Sambo is actually more like sumo wrestling in a lot of ways. It's as soon as the person falls to the ground, that's the end of that game. So yeah, the sports sambo was the easiest way for me to transition across. The rule sets are very similar. Obviously, judo, you've got arm locks and strangles on the ground, where a sports sambo, you've got arm locks and leg locks. So obviously a difference, but yeah, very, very similar with the rule set. You can win from a decent takedown, and if not, you follow up on the ground.
So, did you feel that I'm assuming that because you had an extensive judo background, by the time you got to sambo, you're pretty much 90% there,
Yeah,
right?
for definitely that part. And doing a little bit of jujitsu and other arts along the way, the leg locks and things like that were thereabouts. Obviously, spending majority of my time in judo, it's more about the takedowns and the follow up on the ground. But I the other thing that really attracted me to sambo was in my competition days with judo at the elite level was up until 2008 when they changed the rules dramatically. And I know a lot of judo practitioners from my era didn't really like those changes very much. And I can honestly say I didn't either. I used to do, my style was more wrestling based style where I do a lot of pickups, a lot of leg grabs. Once they took that out of the competition side of judo for the Olympics, it kind of put a lot of people like myself, I wouldn't say off judo, but kind of competition wise, a lot of people sort of gave it away. And when that happened, I was in the army in service at that stage. I was through the Middle East on deployment. So I kind of missed it when it happened. It was more when I left the services that when I started getting back into competition that I had to kind of relearn some of the rules again, which made it a little bit difficult because it had to quickly switch my game dramatically where Sambo was like old style judo, which I could employ my old game tactics. It was very comfortable, very easy for me just to yeah, go to that style.
And done it
So,
well too. Might I say, done it
yeah,
well. He won a couple of national titles
wow,
first time out.
Yeah,
So
gee.
yeah, it was a good day.
that was a good day.
It was a good day.
So, for you now, developing yourself and developing your game, and then adding the ground game, say like the jujitsu ground game, how is that? How is the jujitsu perspective now enhanced or detracted from your pre-existing grappling mindset?
Yeah, jiu-jitsu is definitely a added bonus to judo players for sure. And I think if you look at all styles these days, you got to be very well rounded. The old days of just being able to throw someone and getting back to your feet um, is long gone here in judo. They've changed the rules again, which they do every sort of Olympic cycle, but it's very obvious now at those major tournaments where they're actually giving um, the groundwork a lot more time. So there was a period there where they would only give you sort of 10 or 15 seconds on the ground to do something, which is not a lot of time. They're realizing now that because of the dominance with jiu-jitsu around the world, as in the amount of clubs that are just popping up everywhere, the interest is there, and they want to get a lot more of those jiu-jitsu people across. They've actually changed the rules now to as long as you're progressing on the ground, they'll continue it to going. So we had a big international here in Australia in November last year, and we hosted a lot of international players at our clubs, and you could see the teams that were spending a lot more time on the ground obviously had another major threat that the competitors had to worry about. And when the tournament was actually on, it was those teams who hunted on the ground as well, who just dominated the whole tournament. Um, you could see this was building up over the last few years, and now the rules have sort of relaxed on the ground a lot more. I knew back in the late 90s, once I started training with jiu-jitsu people, that, yeah, my groundwork was not good at all prior to that. And that made a big change for me to start focusing more. And yeah, it's been one thing that at my club we've really focused on, how to take advantage of these opportunities, because a lot of judo players, because of the old rules, go in a very defensive sort of state as soon as they hit the ground. So they're leaving themselves wide open for attacks, and that's something my club specifically we really push. Um, we're lucky here in Australia. There's a lot of very successful jiu-jitsu players, a lot of world champions. So I think it's pretty straightforward that we should be tapping into those resources from judo perspective and actually using those skills and to enhance our own, and should um, should be something that the national team can add a little extra string to their bow and be known as a team that hunts on the ground, like some of the other countries. Spain, funny enough, a couple of years ago, had a lot of Georgian players that joined the Spanish judo team and were really dominant on the ground. And now the whole Spanish team is known as being very dangerous on the ground. We had the team from Finland here, as I said, in November. Again, not knowing judo nation at the top level, and their new coach, who's been with them for a couple of years, is really big on it, and they've been having some amazing results, winning world championships, European championships, and yeah, that again just focusing a lot on that aspect. So jiu-jitsu definitely has a place in judo. Very similar. They come from the same history, and you're seeing a lot with jiu-jitsu as well. A lot more are starting to concentrate on takedowns, because if you can take someone down and pass the legs straight away from the takedown and get in that dominant position, you've done half your work. So, yeah, I think the elite level for both, you got to be good at both these days.
So, do you feel, and I'll throw this out to both you guys, do you feel that, say, let's say in 20 years' time, we're going to see more of a blur between what we call sport jiu-jitsu and sport judo versus what we have had, say, in the last 30, 40 years?
I think it's already
Do
happening.
you think it's going to, yeah, do you think it's going to look more and more similar with these rule adjustments, that it's going to kind of go circle all back, because all the jiu-jitsu ground game, all that newaza, it's simply that, it's newaza. It was just a different emphasis, right? So do you think at some point it's just going to circle around where it's all going to look pretty much the same?
Yeah, I think so. I think obviously the popularity and the amount of people that are doing one or the other, like judo is not massive here in Australia. It's jiu-jitsu is bigger, I would say, for numbers and clubs. But then you flip that on the other way. Internationally, judo is way bigger than jiu-jitsu. I think they are catching up to each other around the world, and they will blend into one sort of style, I think. And most clubs are starting to look that way now, that if you train, you should be able to apply your style in either and just adapt to the rule sets. And that's what I found here with Sambo as well. Like, because Sambo is not massive in Australia yet. Competitions, when they are run here in Australia, you do get a really good mix of people from different styles, and you actually get to see what works in a way to that rule set. And with the three different styles of Sambo as well, it's quite good to see. Obviously, the judo players and the wrestlers are going to do a lot more on, say, beach Sambo, because there's obviously no groundwork. You can't just pull guard or anything. And then sport Sambo, you see a very good blend of both because of the leg locks. Not too many traditional just judo players do anything with legs. And then obviously the combat Sambo, you get all sorts. You get guys who are really good at striking. you get the ones that are proficient in takedowns, and then you get the others who are really good on the ground. So yeah, it's definitely the way moving forward. And I think most people who train just have that warrior ethos where they want to have a crack at anything. And they want to be able to transition across to all different styles. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I know, like, for as an example, coming from my lineage, Machado lineage, when Higan Machado came to the US, he was, especially at the time when he came, there wasn't any jiu-jitsu outside of him and, his cousins. So it was very, very little. His whole thing was he was competing in everything. So he'd be doing judo, sambo, Greco. If there was a grappling tournament, he wanted to get in. If there was people to train with that were some type of grapplers, he wanted to learn from them, And the way that I teach, you cannot level up your grading without having a complete game. You cannot move forward with me, right? Blue belt, purple belt, etc., unless you have a proficient stand-up game. And I very heavily emphasize the stand-up because how do you think you're going to do anything on the ground from a fight if you don't know how to get them to the ground? And it's because I learned judo first, that's still, I have that affinity for, well, you better learn how to grab somebody and throw them down, right? Is what it is. You cannot be graded by me and graduate without having a diverse stand-up game,
Yeah,
just
absolutely. Well, I believe if you only concentrate on the throws or the takedowns and don't concentrate on the ground as well, you're only doing half the game.
Correct.
And obviously vice versa. The guys who are really good on the ground, that's good, but your game could be so much better if you could take someone down and get them into a much better position for you to finish them off than to just sit on the ground and then, work your game from there. If you have that extra element to your game will improve so much more. So we're even here on the Gold Coast, as I said, like we're getting members from pretty much every jiu-jitsu club reaching out and wanting to learn takedowns because they're even seen at their local tournaments now that the people who do have some experience standing up have a massive advantage to start with because that's it. We all start standing up.
I think one of the biggest detriments has been the allowance of guard pulls. And the reason why I say that, I'm totally fine with people working on the ground. I do it every single day. But the thing is there's no such thing as being in an advantage if you're on your ass or you're on your back. I'm sorry. There's no such thing as a fight, as somebody looking at a fight going, the minute you're on your back or your ass, you're winning. Right? It doesn't matter if you're in the military, law enforcement, MMA, it's nonsensical. It's completely idiotic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, oh, sorry, go on.
No, please.
I was just saying, like, one of the sayings I used to have with all the elite sport teams I worked with, and this transitions across to the work I'm doing now with military and law enforcement agents, is that exactly right. Like if we use a context in the football codes here in Australia, if you're off your feet, meaning you're on the ground, you're out of the contest, so you can't actually do anything for your team. And I think it's very similar in military and law enforcement gigs as well. Like a lot of people say, jiu-jitsu is really good for police, which it is, but you need to get them to the ground first. And a lot of the time you don't want to go down with them unless you're handcuffing them, because we've seen it so many times that as soon as someone goes to the ground in those sort of scenarios, it's normally not just one-on-one. There's usually their mates hanging around and they will attack at any moment possible to try and save their friends, so to speak. So I think if you do have that element where you can take people down and maintain control, and then you can assess the area about whether I re-engage and lock them up, or I need to back away and get out whatever kit I need to take that next step, whether it's a spray or a handgun or a baton. Yeah, I think that's one element that a lot don't really think about. Yeah, I mean, any skills help, better than none, because here in Australia, they don't really do a lot with those agencies, and I think that's why it's very popular for guys to join their local gyms. They're realising they got to take it out their own initiative, and everyone trains jiu-jitsu now, so everyone's got some idea on the ground. It's not that easy for these guys to lock them up anymore.
True. There's so much that you can do in terms of, you can see this all the time now. People just watch stuff on YouTube, or they're watching MMA and they're messing around with their friends. And a lot of times that's enough for them to nullify whatever it is you're trying to do, especially if you're not trained well. You know, it's become a bit of a sticky issue. I see that all the time here, especially when, I'm training, helping law enforcement and stuff like that. I see that all the time. They're like, we get stuck because these guys are watching stuff. They're like YouTube warriors, and we can't do what we want to do because they know how to do a triangle, or they know how to get out of an arm bar, or they know how to do this, or they know how to do that. I'm like, yeah, well, see, that's the problem. So I'm curious, how did you guys meet?
Me and Scott. Linny. The Oracle.
Wow.
Yeah.
The
So,
Oracle.
yeah, Linny knew Scott for years and years. She actually sold him a dog. Yeah, old Stormer. Yeah, she was sold Scott a dog, and yeah, they've been friends ever since. And then I came up here. When I came up here, she took me down to Scott's gym and introduced me to Scott, because, funnily enough, I was the one who was promoting the Sambo and bringing it to Queensland and things like that. And Scott jumped on board, and we trained together, and we did his Master of Sport grading together, and we did all that stuff. I was his crash test dummy for his Master of Sport grading with the Russians.
Yeah.
So,
Good
and
day.
we've pretty much been friends ever since. And I work with Scott occasionally on the wellness camps, and come down there and teach all the first responders and all those guys, the veterans, and big supporter of his charities and veterans grappling in general. Used to teach a Sambo class at his gym, and got Scott up to speed, and then Scott took it over, and they're doing great things. I was the state coach for the Sambo Nationals and stuff like that. And we basically met through Linny, and we've been just mates since, talking a lot of shit and doing a lot of stuff together, basically.
Yeah. I think once we met up, we actually got talking and realised we'd been at training together back in the 90s and competing around
Yeah.
the same time.
In judo comps and stuff all over the place. It's crazy.
Yeah. So
That's the story,
That's
bro.
hilarious. Yeah, that's awesome. So in terms of, Scott, I'm curious, in terms of developing, like with what you're doing now, how do you prioritize your teaching method? Like, what are you teaching first? Like, what is kind of like your area of focus?
yeah, well, it depends on what coaching hat I've got on at the time. Do a big broad range from I've got my elite level players, which it's just preparing them for all these major tournaments that come up throughout the year and qualifications into world championships and so forth. Then there's the charity side of things. So charity, the program we have set up there is taking veterans and first responders. We tend to aim it for like the military style. Obviously, I spent some time in the army, so what we call the lowest common denominator, like an absolute beginner, someone who's had no experience at all. Bringing them in, a lot of the times when they get referred to our program, it's usually they've got a lot of compounding issues, physical injuries and mental health issues. So once we gauge where they're at and their actual scope of ability, we structure the class around making it very basic to start with and very slow and controlled. So we want to make sure that they're not chucked into a normal class where the young blue belt sees a fresh white belt and wants to get an early kill, because that's where injuries tend to happen. Because a lot of guys, our generation now from the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq are probably all in their late 30s, early 40s, going through to 50s. So a lot of them aren't fresh young guys who can bounce as well as we all used to. So we try and really slow it down, concentrate on technique, and let them build the basic skills in a very controlled way so that, we can really concentrate on what we call mat time. So when, everyone hears, oh, you need more mat time. But what that actually translates to is getting used to getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So when you've been put in these uncomfortable positions, you know not to panic, stress, and wig out is what we call. You kind of concentrate on your breathing to clear your mind, to think about how we can solve this problem that we're in. So the way I structure the classes for that is I after teaching them techniques on how to get out of bad positions, then we kind of drill that and we work on scenario-based training. So similar to your time in the service, if you're having to come up against, maybe you're going to breach a door to get in to get a bad person, then you just drill that over and over and over again. You start off slow, you slowly build up the pace, you make it a little bit more dynamic, you add a few more little bits and pieces to try and simulate it more like the actual real deal.
Mhm.
We do the same thing from a mat time perspective. So you break down the individual skills, then you slowly do it nice, slow and controlled and methodically, and then build on that to the point where, um, it'll get to competition style. But the timeline on that depends on each individual. So we're not going to be going, all right, by the end of this class, you're going to be able to do it in the competition sense. That might take 3-6 months, depending on their individual's ability and restrictions.
I love that. How did you come up with this idea to do this type of program for veterans?
Yeah, it started, as I said, once I researched and I reached out to the guys in the US from We Defy. So We Defy Foundation, fantastic bunch of people. Been lucky enough to be well connected with these guys over the years. I come over in 23, attended their gala ball and got to meet them all in Dallas there and travel around to a few of the different gyms and talk to a lot of veterans and first responders about their experiences with their program. Luckily, at the same time, we had Sam from Reorg in the UK as well. The three organisations who have been in talk with each other over the years since I started up the foundation. It was really good talking to them about how they do things from their end. Once I started contacting them and with the network with my allied health staff, so the program was that we have these classes during the day in our quiet periods of time where it'd be a bit easier for veterans and first responders to come in where it's not so noisy and not so chaotic. We would have allied health staff there at all times as well. So exercise physiologists, psychologists, physiotherapists, they're on standby basically. So if people were worried that they were unable to do a move because of their injuries, then we would work together and give them an alternative to still be able to solve the same problem.
Mhm.
Or we had people who um, found it too stressful. We've had a couple of female athletes, veterans who had some DV issues, and when we got in that close proximity, they they had a little panic attack a couple of times. So it was good having the psych there where they could go off and just sort of talk things through and then come back into the class, maybe 5 or 10 minutes later once they've had some chats. So yeah, it kind of evolved as time went on. We started with a group of guys together, guys and girls together who had an interest and just started training in a more low key sort of variant. But then as time went on, we developed it quite well and been very successful. And then from there, it evolved into camps as well. So we'd run a wellness camp a couple of times a year, normally over a long weekend. We'd have veterans from all over Australia come to us. Basically, we'd had it at our gym, and the last one we ran was at a community sort of school camp there in early December, which is a beautiful spot here on the Gold Coast. December, it's summertime over here, so right on the beach, beautiful warm weather, and a lot of time again training your skills on the mats, but also sitting down and spending a lot of time talking. So we the veterans community, a lot of the talking can be done at a bar, which is the old one from the World War II and Vietnam guys sort of done it at a bar. Our generation tends to start doing it more around a campfire. Another way, sit around a campfire and have a chat and talk about things. We found that with our program, it's sitting around after training on the mats. It's your safe space. So we sit down after training, after we've exerted ourselves and made ourselves very tired. We tend to finish our class off with a mindfulness sort of 10-minute session there as well, where we concentrate more on breathing. So even though it's a form of yoga, we don't like to call it yoga because a lot of the big staunch veterans don't want to do a yoga session, but we either call it mindfulness or the old combat breathing. Try and relate that to the guys. There's elements there where some of the units are really good at, they call combat breathing, where they practice a breathing routine before they go into combat. So we tend to run that at the end of the session just to mellow everyone out. And then we sit around and we have a good chat, or we go have a coffee somewhere and talk the shit. So in our camps, we do a lot of talking. We tend to have a talking stick that we pass around. And then when that person holds that stick, they're the only one that's allowed to talk. And there'll be a topic each time. But the whole idea is, again, just to, while people are feeling comfortable, and yeah, we really encourage them to talk what's going on, because I think society in general these days, we just tend to bottle everything up. And then when we do, it eventually takes its toll. So just being able to sit down and have a chat is very therapeutic. It's very underrated, I think, in society, and hopefully more people do it so we have less people taking their own lives.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so I have a question for you because you really got me thinking here. How does it work for, say, veterans with PTSD? I would imagine in certain scenarios, especially when we're grappling, we're on the ground, people that have already had PTSD from combat, they may find it very, I don't know if threatening would be the right word, but maybe triggering to be in physical scenarios again that they may have a flashback or something triggering. So how does that work?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like, I know for myself, when I come back from war, I used to go diving a lot before I joined, and I went out with my sister, and I freaked out because being in the ocean and not knowing what's around me. And I think a lot of veterans have that same thing where they like to be sort of in control of the situation for their own fight or flight system not to kick in. So when you're in close proximity with someone and you're wrestling and potentially, it could be in life-threatening scenarios for people who are, untrained and not really know what's going on. That is a perception that some people might have and have doubts on themselves. But the way that the grappling arts are set up is that it's probably completely different to what the untrained people think. It's very slow and controlled, and it's all built on trust. And that was one of the things that we found with our studies with our project, is that one of the real big things, which we didn't think much of it when we started, but it was clear and evident in a very short period of time, was that building trust with your partner, knowing that they could potentially injure you if they are that spazzy blue belt who just wants to get the kill on. Once we teach them that all you have to do is tap and the person will let go, and you build that trust from the start, that know that if it is ever too much, all you have to do is do this, is tap. And as soon as you tap, that person will stop. So there's no danger. And it's okay to tap. There's no reason why it's not. And I think the fact that people can build that little trust with the training partner is a huge psychological step for the veterans and first responders. Tend to not trust too many people from their service. So that is a major hurdle from the very start, which we did not really think about until we implemented the program, and then some of the feedback we got sort of brought that to light. And it makes a lot of sense, knowing that something so simple, it's just the trust issue. And I think that's a lot of the problems with that PTSD sort of situation, is that because, their trust has been broken in the past, it's something that, being up nice and close with someone can be a little bit intimidating. But that comes down obviously to coaches and everything as well. But that was a massive sort of light bulb moment when that occurred early days.
So how do you, I mean, I'm trying to really get a visual of this. How do you introduce that protocol? Because I can only imagine somebody that's really, really sensitive, has a deep-rooted PTSD, and they're coming in. And I can understand the process of, okay, well, if you tap, they're going to let go. But how do you engage them from the beginning, where it's just like, here's how we're going to start touching each other physically? Because, at the end of the day, we've talked about this on the show before, ultimately we're playing kill. But we're playing kill with a gentleman's agreement that when we say stop or uncle or tap, we let go. So how do you really introduce that? Is that a class first, or a lecture where you're training them on here's what it is? And do you give them certain boundaries of here's how we're going to start our engagement so they can take it in slow steps?
Yeah. So I'll reflect back on, so one of the instances we had was a lady who had PTSD really bad, and she had some issues with guys in the past, both in service and out of service. So she was very anxious about coming to the program, but also knew that she wanted to learn a lot for her self-defense and her own confidence and everything. So when she first come in, the first few weeks, she basically just sat on the side and just watched. That was her first step. And she sat there with the psych, and the psych sort of talked through some of the things that she was feeling at the time, and sort of slow stepping stones. The classes that we normally have set up is you have a group class, or you can have individual one-on-one as well. So depending on where the person is at with their mental state as well as their physical state will depend on which avenue we think is best for them. The people that they're training with are normally either the allied health staff, who will train as well, or people who are in a similar sort of state. So if obviously with her, we would put her with other females to start with. Again, slowly build up to it. And then as we start teaching the techniques, again, we pick techniques that are making sure that they're not going to make her feel in this way. So we try and do more takedown orientated to start with, where she learns to sort of disarm the person and take them down, and then she can walk away. And then when we build up to a part where we start doing stuff on the ground, again, let's work on bits and pieces to slowly build her confidence up. So we used to do this. Well, when we finally built up to the part where she's doing activities on the ground, we would drill a technique with someone that she was comfortable with, and then get to the point where when it comes to like the sparring part of it, it wouldn't be your normal sparring. We would play chess. So like the board game chess, we would take a turn. So my turn first, I will do a move, and that person just sort of goes with the flow. And then we pause, and then we reflect on where we are and what we're doing. And then that gives the learning person on the ground, it's their turn to have a shot, and they have got as limited time as they want. They can sit there and go, okay, I'm in half guard now. Person's onto my left. They've locked up my head. What can I do? And then if they're unsure what to do, what their next step is, then they would talk to the coach who's with them and try and get an idea. So we slow it down, and that moment you can adapt the amount of pressure, the distance, anything to make them comfortable enough to continue on with their training. So we turn by turn until they get comfortable with that. And then obviously those turns tend to shorten, and the time seems to get quicker, and then it ends up being more free flowing and getting to the point that they just end up training like normal with the person that they're working, that they're comfortable with. And then we start introducing other people into it. The program that we run through the day, we've had people rip through that in a couple of months, and then we've had others that are still there 5 years later. Everyone's got their own length of time that they'll be in that program. Some find it super easy and they get through it, and they can be integrated into the civilian classes and swimming, just going flat out, and have gone on to gradings and competitions and the whole lot, and got a whole new community, which is fantastic. A whole group of new friends. Others who are a little bit more challenged with their physical and mental health issues take a few years even, and that's no drama at all. Everyone's got their own path that they'll take, and yeah, step by step. Sometimes you're going to have weeks where you might go backwards with your progress, and that's all part of the journey.
That's fantastic. I love that. I think it's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. And it sounds to me that you're definitely creating a safe space for these remarkable individuals to develop at their pace in a way that they can get something out of it, not just from that physical development, but really kind of working towards that path of healing and pulling that, hopefully being able to pull them out of that PTSD and working in an environment where they're supported and they feel secure, right? So they can develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once they've got the skills to actually implement into the game, so to speak, once they're in that game, it's really hard to think about all your problems off the mat. When you got to be present in the moment. If you're not present in the moment, you're either going to get taken down, you're going to get arm locked, you're going to get strangled, you're going to get your leg taken. So it's kind of, it is a form of meditation in itself, because you really need to concentrate on what you're doing and control your breathing. Breathing's number one, which is meditation. It's forced in a way. As we say, mat time's all about being uncomfortable being comfortable in these uncomfortable positions, which is meditation. I think the more people train from this program, the more they realize that. And yeah, it's very, very great to see from the coaching perspective on the sidelines, sort of on the outskirts, I should say, just watching these people evolve. And, we've had some people come from intensive stay in hospital drug and alcohol programs that would get day released to come to our program for the hour and a half, and then they would get taken back to hospital. And seeing where they've been when they've first come to us to seeing them now where they've been sober for 4 or 5 years and they've lost a heap of weight and they've turned their life around, they're back working and they've saved their marriage, they've done all this sort of stuff. Uh, it's very humbling to sit back and see how these people have really turned their own life around. They kind of say, well, it's us. Well, not really. Well, we've led the horse to the water. The horse is the one who decides to drink. Things like that, and people who have been rock bottom and suicidal for all sorts of reasons, and then have gone on and finished degrees at uni and in their late 40s and are now lawyers for the government here in Australia and neuroscientists and all sorts of stuff. It's really humbling to see where people have come from and where they're at now. It's great. And, that's the part of coaching that I'm sure we all love, seeing people not only improve their skills on the mat, but change their life off the mat, because that's really the main point.
That's remarkable. Did you happen to read Hickson Gracie's book, Breathe?
I do. Yeah, I've got it on the shelf over here.
So do you remember there was that part in the book where he was talking about when he was very young, he was having trouble being stuck in certain positions on the bottom, and he had his brother roll him up in a carpet. And he's like, don't let me out until I get comfortable being in an uncomfortable position. I think that, obviously it's a bit extreme, but you wouldn't expect anything less from Hickson. But it's kind of like that same concept, right? Of when we start to develop our situational awareness where we become more comfortable in uncomfortable situations, right? It kind of pulls us out of our safety zone, so to speak, and allows us to expand, our emotional boundaries. But it sounds like you guys have had tremendous success in developing these people, which hats off to you, man. I mean, I think that's phenomenal.
Having been involved with Scott for a lot of years now and with veterans grappling and their wellness camps and that, dude, it's amazing to see the way that they facilitate these things. And it was an honour for me to be a part of the first camp and some coaching and stuff. But the guys there are amazing. Yeah, they do really, really good things for really, really good people. And I'd love to see it more supported, especially on a government level and stuff like that. It'd be amazing.
Well, Scott, how can people reach out to you if they want to support and, be a part of the organization, either as participants or as donors? How can they do that? How can they find you?
Yeah, definitely check out our websites and our social media. We're actually just about to launch a scholarship program as well. So we've got our camps that you've been talking about, and locally we've been running the program, but we want to expand out to the rest of the country. Australia is massive. It's the same size as the US, basically. We just don't have anywhere near the people. We've got about 25 million people in the country. What we're trying to do is have scholarships for veterans to go join their local clubs and train at those clubs. So the scholarship window should be open by the time this comes out. And we're hoping that clubs and coaches who are interested in implementing something like this, if they could reach out, and then we will work a way where we can teach people our practices on how we run the program, so that we can kind of have that same standard across the board where wherever the people are in the country, they can get this type of training and hopefully get the same sort of results of what we've had here in the last few years. be fantastic. We are, I think, the scholarships we've sort of quoted for a year's membership, year's training fees, and all the equipment's about $2,500 Australian dollars. So you should have the option to, if you want to donate and pay for someone's scholarship, or you even want to come on board and help pay for one of the camps, come on as a sponsor. All the information should be on the website.
So what is the website and what's the social media handle?
Yep. Social media's Veterans Grappling, and the website is www.veteransgrappling.org. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter. Yeah, they are the handles, and that's our website. If not, just reach out on one of them, and the team will get back to you. And it's moving forward. We'd like to get things spread out across the country a little bit more, run a few more camps, and a long-term goal, which we're trying to do in the background, is try and get the grappling arts in the Warrior and Invictus Games for veterans and first responders. That's always a little bit harder. So if not, we might just organise our own competitions. I know Reorg have got the Reorg Open, the Jiu-Jitsu tournament. It's open to anyone, but the money raised from that goes to their charity. We might do something similar in the end here in Australia if we can't get it in those other events, because, the World Military Games is a massive event for judo. Jiu-Jitsu is getting real big in police and fire games. So there's a lot of the emergency services and military teams, everyone's doing judo and jiu-jitsu now. So we want them to be able to continue once they get out of service. So once they are a veteran, continue on with their training and help spread the word.
Love it. Well, I am behind it 100%. Anything I can do to help support that from here in the U.S., let me know. One of the biggest concerns that I have just around the world, especially here in the U.S., being a U.S. citizen, is we don't have enough programs for veterans. And I think we need a lot more support and a lot more people volunteering to help veterans. They put their lives on the line for us, and we need to give back as much as possible and help them with their journey. Because especially here in the United States, I don't know what you guys have there, but we have such a homeless issue with veterans. It bothers me to no end that there's a lot of veterans that leave the service, and I'm grateful for all you veterans that have done service for our respective countries, and there's no support once they get out. To me, I'm not president. I'm not in politics in any way. I'm not a political person, but there should be an automatic program that when people leave service, there are programs for them for job training, job placement, housing, PTSD support, what you're doing. These are things that should be mandatory, that it's an automatic plug-in. This is critical, because our homeless problem here in the US is a huge percentage of these people are veterans. And it's heartbreaking that they do not have the support and the infrastructure that they need to have a life outside of the service. Like I said, it breaks my heart, and I don't feel like there's just enough going on. So my hat's off to you for what you're doing. And like I said, anything I can do to support your endeavors, I'm 100% behind it. And the Level Up Grappling podcast is 100% behind it, because I just, whatever we're doing, we're not doing enough. And it just needs to be a very intentional focus. So I love it, and I'm very grateful.
And for all the listeners in Australia that listen to me and like how I talk shit and bag everybody else, get on and support Veterans Grappling. Yeah, we do, so should you. And sit in the background and go, oh, it's great what they're doing. Do something about it. Help out.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. Very enlightening, Scott. So I really appreciate your input and sharing with us today. So guys, get out there, please support the organization, and even if you're in Australia, this should be mandatory that you're supporting this program. If you're a listener to the podcast, this is mandatory. You have no excuse not to support the program, be it coming out to volunteer with your pocketbook. I don't care, but you have to support this. Our veterans have given their lives for our security, our freedom, and their service to our respective countries. We absolutely must support programs like this. There's no excuse. Absolutely no excuse. Okay. And remember, guys, like and subscribe. I want you every week. Your homework is to share this podcast with 3 people. I want 3 new people a week. Okay. And you have to do it. And please support. Okay. Support the podcast, support this amazing program. And if there's a local program where you can get out there and volunteer and just help, please do that, because our veterans are everything. Okay. They gave their lives for you, and it's your duty to give something back. And I will not accept "I'll get around to it" as an excuse. You fucking do it today. Okay. It's no excuses, guys. And this has been wonderful. And with that, guys, we are out of here. Boom.